for Am I Rich? And today we're going to talk about another, well, I'm not sure, but maybe a cheap company. We'll have to kind of think about that. So this company is called Proto Labs. Its ticker symbol is PRLB. And this is a prototyping and small batch manufacturing company. Now, they have several facilities around the world. They're headquartered in Minnesota. Their biggest manufacturing plant is basically in Minnesota, and they also have facilities in Europe and Japan, aside from the United States, which is kind of their main hub. The company has had big clients like MIT, the Metropolitan Museum, Lockheed Martin, PepsiCo, and many, many others. And what they like to do is make prototypes for these companies, or things like promotional material in the case of Pepsi. So, you know, for example, they might make something like a promotional material for the movie Black Panther, but make it into like a cup for Pepsi Cola. The way they do these manufacturing jobs are by using an injection molding, which is what their specialty was originally. They originally were called Proto Molds, I believe, which Proto Molds, I guess it's an okay company name, but they decided because they're using CNC and other techniques, they'd move the name to Proto Labs. And so now that they're called Proto Labs, like I said, they do injection molding, CNC, and also now sheet metal fabrication. But the thing that has gotten them kind of famous, well, I guess more famous, they're not super famous, but a little bit more famous of late is their 3D printing ability. So if you want some kind of a, I don't know, something like this Jupiter model for some reason, I don't know, they can help you make something like that. So they have been doing quite well as far as growth in their company. They've been growing across the world, like I mentioned, and they have had a bit of hype because of the 3D printing boom. And 3D printing in general had a big boost a few years back. So it had that going for it, and I don't know if the hype for 3D printing is still there, but I kind of see 3D printing as something that could be still on the upswing, and especially for the long term. So this is why I'm a little bit interested in this company. Now, its stock price is at $103 currently, and another reason to be interested in this stock for me was that last year it was over $160, so it's come down quite a bit. Now, is it justified, or is it cheap enough to be a value investment? I'm not fully convinced yet, but let's just go through the numbers and go through a few scenarios, I guess. And so the PE ratio currently is at 36.6. The forward PE ratio is at 29.5. And the price to book value is 5.1. These numbers are not cheap. It does indicate that it's growing, but it's not cheap. The dividend is non-existent because it's quite a new kind of growth story. And its 5-year growth, which should be good if we're thinking this is a good company, was 22.7%. And just the last year it grew, I think, more than 40%, or very close to 40%. So what are some of the reasons first why the stock price crashed? Well, one thing is that last year many stocks crashed, especially in growth or tech sectors, among others. They crashed because the whole market crashed. There was a lot of hype about the global economy slowing down, and so it dropped quite a bit. I think it dropped down in December. It was like $110 from over $160 originally. And so this was kind of an interesting price as well, but since then it shot up. It went up to $110 or $120 or so, maybe a little bit more than that. And then last week they came out with their earnings report, and when they mentioned their earnings, they had failed to meet their low range expectations for earnings growth, which is kind of a bad sign for a lot of analysts. So this stock price did drop by 20% last week. So that's probably why it's in the 100 and change kind of range. Now, was this justified? Well, the reasons they didn't meet their earnings expectations were primarily because they're moving into a bigger warehouse in their main facility, I believe, in Minnesota. And this new facility, they had to use a little bit more overhead or overtime hours to basically move the whole facility into a good shape and maintain their manufacturing abilities at the same time of while they were moving. So there was a few unforeseen kind of costs to that. Cost a little bit more than expected. That really dragged on their earnings. They still grew, mind you. They were still growing. They're still growing their earnings. They're still they have a lot of equity compared to their liabilities. So it wasn't something that's going to hurt the company overall as far as its operations, but it wasn't looked upon very positively. And I think this is one reason why this is kind of interesting stock, because if the hype around the stock that was there in the past it still exists to some extent, then this one-time event could be a good buying opportunity. Now, there were other things in the earnings that kind of set this on a bit of a interesting scenario as well. They also mentioned that they came out with sheet metal fabrication recently, and they were trying to promote that. They thought the growth in that would be a little bit faster than expected, but they found they didn't train their salespeople well enough to really show the great advantages of it, or their clients, general clients, didn't know about it as much. So they don't think it's being utilized fully. So they think it has a lot more growth in the future, but that is, what they think, and their numbers aren't really pointing to that yet. So it's kind of something that might not work out, but might work out. It is still doing okay. So it has been growing quite a bit still. So that there is potential to believe them, and there's also potential to think this isn't going to hinder their company that much. One potential risk that they have is if they grow too fast, they might have trouble integrating new companies. But so far what they've shown is they've been very diligent in their finances, and they haven't blown their budgets at all. They've been kind of doing a very safe growth, a fast but safe growth approach, so that they don't get their financials out of order. And this has actually helped them a lot, because their main competitors, they have lots of regional competitors for prototyping, but because they're somewhat global, I guess, their big competitors are Stratasys, 3D Systems, especially in the 3D printing realm, and maybe Hewlett Packard might be coming in as well in the future for 3D printing. But those other companies haven't been able to show that they can be financially responsible. So one argument is that if you put your money in a company that is financially responsible, it's hard to know if somebody's going to change in the future. But if somebody's already doing something, then there's a good chance that they can continue doing it. So their good finance approach, and keeping costs low, keeping things really streamlined as best possible, has really paid off so far. And this has kind of given them a good position in the 3D printing market. So the way I see it is, if you think 3D printing is the way of the future, I see this, and I do see as 3D printing increases in popularity and in ability, then it's going to become more and more prevalent around the world for our manufacturing. And it will start to replace different techniques depending on how refined the 3D printing can be and how fast it can be. So right now it's not doing what injection molding is, but this company also does injection molding. So maybe not on a large scale of some other companies, but in general they do that. So they have this position where they are set up for the growth of 3D printing. And the one advantage they might have over some of their bigger competitors is that they might not be tied into certain 3D printing technology that like might be in-house, whereas they just buy the equipment from different companies that is the best that they can use. So as technology improves in the future, they can just keep updating themselves to be kind of at the cutting edge of it. And also, because of their good finances, they can kind of acquire some other companies that might be able to disrupt them. So I see that as a really good thing for them. I don't know if it's the greatest moat, but it's a kind of a nice moat. And they really have good potential that way. So that's kind of my bull thesis on them. They have good potential. The stock price dropped mostly due to one-time costs or very minimal interruptions in their earnings. So I see them kind of growing again. And so the price might be worth it, even though they are quite overvalued still at the moment. I think the downside is that they don't grow at all, except for maybe in Japan. They kind of make their manufacturing level similar to the United States or a little bit less. And then I think the stock price should probably be around $80 in that kind of scenario. But in a positive case scenario, I see this company growing still, and as 3D manufacturing becomes finer and faster, these guys are set up to be in a really good spot for being a major player in that. So yeah, I don't know what you guys think, but I'd love to hear your comments about Proto Labs or anything else. And yeah, I thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.